Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Devils Insiders podcast as we wrap up the 2014-2015 season alongside Dave Turner. I'm Jeff O'Connor, and Dave, um, before we get into all the moves and the change of course that this franchise is going to take with the news that came out over the last week or so, we wrap up the 2014-15 season, and now 3 years out of the playoffs, 4 out of the last 5, which really make you think just how the heck that 2011-2012 Cup run managed to mix in there. I mean, I know Parisi was out all 2010 and 11, but it's amazing to see how steeply it's turned the last few years. Well, this year, it's hard to compare it to the other years because I thought the 2013-14 team actually had a really good year after that awful, they lost 7 games, whether it was in overtime or the regular season to start off 2013-14. I actually thought that team had a really good year, but for whatever reason, this team, they never put together any real stretches. I think they finally got one of those 3-game win streaks in, but they didn't put any of those big, 9 wins in 13 games, something like that. For whatever reason, this team just continues to struggle to score goals, and really there's no talent anywhere. The free agent signings have been botched. The trades haven't been there necessarily. And obviously the drafting is bad. And you consider all 3 of those when free agency, trade market, and drafting all go bad. This is now what you are stuck with, the 3rd straight year of missing the playoffs. And depending how things shake out, maybe a 4th year.
Yeah, I think that's something that everyone should expect. And I know people might look at that and say, oh, it's a pessimistic look. I don't think it is. If you look at the talent on this team right now, unless they're going to go out and make a ton of moves, which we'll get into our thoughts on that in a little bit, but I don't think that there's really anything other than Corey Schneider being good enough that, yeah, he really could carry this team a little bit. But considering that they can't put pucks in the net, Corey Schneider had a year that on a good team, he might have even been close to a Vezina finalist, and it still wasn't even nearly enough to get them anywhere close to the playoffs. And that kind of shows just how bad they were offensively, and the fact that defensively they took their lumps a little bit with some of the young guys. Adam Larsson certainly came on as of late, and getting Damon Severson back in the fold was good late in the year. But there's a lot of work to do. And I think, honestly, even if they do make a move or the young guys start to play a little bit better, I think you have to go into this year not expecting to make the playoffs, which is something that in the Devils organization no one is used to, but that's the reality.
Yeah, I think the positive you definitely take away is that Corey Schneider handled a full year's workload, even with that ridiculous 20 straight games, whatever the heck it was. He handled that. He came through it, especially in October, November. It looked like, maybe – I'm not sure if he's going to have what it takes to be a number 1 guy, but then really, once November hit, he took it, to the finish line, playing extremely well. I really can't recall over the last 40, 50 games. I can't count more than maybe a handful of bad goals he gave up. I thought they were all legitimate, which I think is certainly a good sign, a helpful sign going into the future that he can be a top guy that can lead you to a cup. And Adam Larsson has come alive now, getting the reign to play from Scott Stevens, allowing him to make mistakes, come back the next night without repercussion, and just letting him play his game. I think he played faster, freer, looser, all those things combined, and he's starting to perhaps round into that number 4 pick that the Devils selected him with, and he's still extremely young, which is just excellent. I'm still interested to see how Damon Severson comes back. He was really, really good before he fractured whatever his leg or his ankle. And he came back. He looked okay. He looked adequate. I wonder if he can jump back to that solid level where it looked like he was easily the Devils' best defenseman alongside Andy Green, through those first 15 games. So I'm hoping really when you bring the next year is you've got cornerstones of Schneider, Larsson, Green. Maybe Severson can round into a 3rd guy you can trust. And there's so many teams that you need 3 guys who play like number 1s, I think, now to win in this league, to win a cup. You can go back and look through some of the cup winners. They've all got, obviously, a number 1 stud and then a few guys that play extremely high levels. I think you have that now if Severson can take another jump. And then really it comes down to offense. Mike Camilleri was awesome, even though he had some injuries here and there. I mean, he's what you paid for. Finally, a move that's actually seeming to be productive, that's actually paying off a little bit. They went out and got a goal scorer, and he scored goals, which is what they need to do instead of settling for guys like Ryan Clough, who have had, they have a career year like 4 years before the Devils sign him, then the Devils sign him. So him, Ryder, now you get a guy like Camilleri who's a goal scorer. Now you need to find a way to add to that, whether it's through youth and churning them into that, or taking the money. If you're going to spend money on a goal scorer, go spend money on a goal scorer. Don't spend $4 million on a tweener of a second, third line player. If you want to go spend $7-8 million, I'm okay with that. Just make sure you're getting a guy who has a track record of scoring 25 plus goals a year for 5 straight seasons. So I think everything's in place as far as the leading cast members, if you will. I think, but some high-level complementary players, if that makes sense, need to be added. So not just complementary and role players, but some high-level complementary players need to be added to the mix, and I think this team will be right back there. So those are the positives I took out of 2014-15.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the other ones were Scott Gomez. I do think they're going to bring him back. Scott Gomez, look, if you take his point production and put it over an 82-game season, if they had signed him early on, he's looking at like 50-something points. I mean, he was very good playing on a team that, look, Gomez is a guy who kind of needs support players to really flourish. He needs guys who can shoot. And considering that the Devils don't necessarily have that lineup, I thought Gomez looked very good. Even looking at another center who I thought at least has solidified his role as a fourth liner who can play the penalty kill, who can win shootouts, is Jacob Josephson. I know he's not what the Devils expected when they drafted him in the first round. They probably expected him to at least be a second line player. He's not that, but at the very least, better than what Matthias Tenby is doing for the club right now, because he's actually playing. And I thought he showed some nice signs of being what would be a good energy kind of player on a good team. Sure, right now he kind of gets lost in the mold because there's not enough around him, and he doesn't really have that role. But he's a guy who has a little speed. Finally, knock on wood, he's stayed healthy, which is big for him. So I think, offensively there were a couple of things to at least be happy about. But obviously the one that, to me, the issue is Travis Zajac. His contract, he's actually, I know the cap hit is $5.75 million. He's actually making upwards of $6 in total for this year. Yeah. And for him to have 24 points, and look, Travis Zajac's a good guy, and he does work hard, but you get the feeling that he has been the product of good players around him. Yeah. And sure, he probably could put up a 60-point season if you put him with some really good players, but to me, that's not the kind of player you want to build your team around, is someone who needs other talent. The Devils right now need guys who can bring up the quality of the play of the guys around them. And then clearly Zajac has shown that. And I hate to say it, but maybe he's a second-line center. Honestly, he probably is a really good third-line center. To me, that's a problem, is that they don't really have a number one center. Henrique, I still think, is better on the wing. Gomez, though he's looked good, is certainly not a number one. And Zajac isn't either. And to me, that's the biggest thing, is that this team will not compete with the big teams in the East and even expect to try to go out west and win some games unless they have the center, down the middle. And right now they don't have it.
Yeah, I know we definitely like what we saw from some of the bottom level guys, if you will. I thought, agreeing with you on Josephson, for whatever reason, he just played a little bit more aggressive, heavier game this year, if that makes sense. Like, he wasn't afraid to go into a corner and rattle a guy or two. He looked very fluid. He looked very solid, which was good to see. And the same for guys like Jordan Tutu. But the problem is Devils have too many guys who are more built for the third line than the second line. So that hopefully that'll be addressed. And we're still a month and a half away from the draft. A little bit after that free agency. So there's still a little bit of waiting around as we evaluate the Devils' 2014-15 season. And we'll put the season kind of in the rearview mirror now and talk about the big shakeup that came last week. And I couldn't help myself, but when I saw there was a Devils conference call at 4 p.m. Last week, putting some odds on it, it's a hashtag Devils Twitter. Very much the thing to do is while we're waiting around, make as many jokes or puns or feel sorry for ourselves. That's kind of the thing to do. So I figured, why not get in the mix on that? And I didn't think the over 1,000,000 to 1 odds I put of Lou stepping down as GM would actually hit compared to bringing Marty back or a new head coach or something like that. But, we asked for it. We didn't, we were semi-joking about putting up billboards at one point. But, he finally, the new ownership, a group that's really not going to take crap from anyone. Maybe like Jeff Vanderbeek. Not to say Jeff Vanderbeek took crap, but he kind of let Lou do his own thing. Really free will, it seemed like. There really was no rules on him. There's a little more structure with the new ownership, and that, from everything that's been reported, that there was an exit strategy for Lamoriello when new ownership got on the spot, which you remember was in the summer of 2013. So this is their second full season that ownership has been here, and they felt that they gave him a little bit of a nudge and said, the time is sort of now. I mean, if Devils made the playoffs either of the last 2 years, then maybe Lamoriello still has that title. But regardless, he's no longer the GM. He stepped down, and immediately during that conference call, it was announced that Ray Shero, the former Pittsburgh Penguins general manager, will be the guy now after having taken a year off. If you remember 2 seasons ago, he was fired at the end of the year. With his contract was still there. His contract wasn't up. He was fired. Jim Rutherford came in from Carolina, and Shero sat this last season out. So he's in now. I'm not sure what to expect from him, except the fact that he's had experience drafting hyped youth guys. The Devils really don't have any hyped youth guys, so I think for that, in general, is certainly something that'll be helpful. But for the most part, he hasn't really produced a lot of guys either, but it is a fresh look. He's a much younger guy than Lamoriello, and perhaps the model of the way he made some trade. He made some trades. He got guys he wanted. He was definitely aggressive. They're paying the price for it now with the lack of draft picks they have, but he knows how to get a guy, and I think that's what the Devils ownership wanted more than anything. They wanted an aggressive guy who finds a way to get high-quality players in here, and then gets the job done in that regard. Maybe not through the draft or whatever, but when he makes trades, he gets the exact guy he's wanted. He's made some tremendous trades to get quality talent in there the last few years while he was Penguins GM. So he's the guy at the Devils now. I think there's at least a reason for hope, no matter what Shero's track record is, that there's a fresh look on evaluating the players and the way things are done.
Yeah, he's been a couple other places in his career, and he's kind of worked his way up, and then he did very well in Pittsburgh. Look, you can make the case that if Marc-Andre Fleury doesn't really fall apart the last, not this year, but in years past in the playoffs, maybe he has another Stanley Cup or at least an Eastern Conference championship banner to his name. He built a good, solid foundation, a team that is still competing and doing well right now, which most of the players were under, were his signings and so on and so forth. I like it. I think that he's an aggressive trader that has always seemed to kind of be able to pull those moves off, and that's kind of what Lou has been. Where certainly Lou is much better as a guy who can pull the plug on a trade, as opposed to a guy who drafts well, because we all know that isn't the case. But I think that this was a move that was going to happen probably even if they did make the playoffs, just because. Put it this way: you look at the way that the Devils got Corey Schneider, that they went out and got him. Maybe right before, instead of going and having Brodeur retire and then looking for a goalie, they were proactive. Where even though there is certainly the writing on the wall that Lou's best days were behind him, it was a move that Lou still can oversee things, kind of impart some of the Devils mentality into Ray Shero, and at the same point, you get a fresh look. And a guy who's going to do things a little bit differently. He's not going to evaluate guys the same way. I'm sure there will be changes, maybe not necessarily this year, but within the coming years in the scouting staff, I'm sure that's going to be the case, because it's not like they've really had a lot of success. I like it. He's a guy who has proven that he can win. It's not like he was fired because the Penguins all of a sudden went from first place to a lottery team. They just had really high expectations there. And you know what? Look, if the expectations for the Devils in a couple of years under Shero are cup or bust, great, because the team is so far away from that right now that certainly this guy has the ability to get a team to that point. Sure, he had Sidney Crosby, that makes a big difference, and Evgeny Malkin, but I like what I've seen from him. I like the aggressiveness from him, and I think it'll take a couple years now. But in the long run, I think it's a good move.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I mean, we'll see what his drafts are like, and obviously that's been the biggest area of concern. But again, we talked about being aggressive and bringing in impact players. I mean, you can go down the list of what he's brought in. He's made some excellent trades over time there. I mean, who can forget getting James Neal and Matt Niskanen for Alex Goligoski back in 2011. I mean, he got Marian Hossa and Pascal Dupuis. The centerpiece of that deal ended up being Colby Armstrong. Just tremendous. I mean, he got Chris Kunitz. He traded a guy in Ryan Whitney who's had his moments, but Kunitz has turned into a top line player. Perennial, all-star candidate every single year. So I mean, he brings in talent for very little. And really, what a perfect guy, because the Devils really do have very little talent at the lower level and really on the big squad as well. So you can turn that into something, even just consistent players. I mean, that would be helpful as well. So I think it'll end up being a good thing for the Devils. I'm not sure what the plan. I really don't know what the plan is for Ray Shero. Remember a few years ago when the Devils signed Peter DeBoer, they mentioned, after the 2013 season, they mentioned that he had an option on his contract, then that they picked up his option, and then Lamoriello said at the end of the 13-14 season that DeBoer had an option on his contract. So you don't know with the Devils, you don't know what Ray Shero, how long they envision this process to be, or what ownership's going to make of it. I think he'll get a little bit of leeway. And for me personally, I've seen it this way for a while. This year coming up needs to be a throwaway. I wouldn't throw any big money or any big assets at anyone out there, because really on the free agent market, there's nothing really appetizing. Like a Yuri Talusti, something like that. That's, for me, those are really the headline guys, and that's not worth spending big money on or trading a big piece to get someone. So I would kind of let things go as they may. Maybe add some nice depth players on short-term deals. That's about all I would do this year. And then I think the plan is there needs to be some type of hope shown in the 2016-17 season. I don't think necessarily has to be playoffs, but there has to be some, shining glimmer that, Adam Henrique is now a star-studded player, and then maybe some of the defensemen are right on the verge of becoming very good to great. I think that's the deal for me. They probably have a leash of maybe 2 more years of missing the playoffs, but there probably needs to be some hard results by the 2017-18 season. But I think they need to see some marked improvement in 2016 and 17.
Absolutely. And, the question becomes, for anyone listening to this, would you rather have this team overspend like crazy and grab a Talusti and some of the other guys who are out there and maybe make the playoffs or make it close, and then have all these contracts on guys who are, look, we saw like what the Winnipeg Jets did, or even, the Penguins is a team that clearly had, at this point, less talent, even with Crosby. Do you want to be that team? And I don't think they do. Actually, Harris the other day, Josh Harris actually was quoted as saying, I'll read this to you, he goes, "There are no shortcuts. We are going to make decisions that allow us to be an elite team, and that's not being one and done in the playoffs." So I guess he's maybe taking a page out of his ongoing 76ers book and trying to build for the future. So maybe there is a little leeway here where Harris said that, where I guess he knows now that this is not a one-year fix, and to be so short-sighted as to spend money. I always feel that if you're going to spend your money heavily in free agency, it's got to be when you have a window to compete. Because if you have young guys in the system, which the Devils somewhat do, not much, but a little bit, and they will have a draft pick this year, assuming they hold on to it, to overspend on a guy like that, they need to fit a need. You can't just throw money at guys and expect them to come in and really fix a team that can't score. So, look, someone wants to go out there and give some of the really mediocre guys out there, 20, 25 goal scorers at best, who are out there, and expect them to be first-line players. It's not going to happen. Let another team go out and give someone $4.5 million for 4 years or something like that, because that's not the way to build long-term success. And as I said before, I'd rather them go and just keep the money, and especially with all the guys who are coming off the books next year. You have Zubris, you have Eliash, and you have Tuomo Ruutu as well. So that's a lot of money coming off the books. Why not hedge your bets next year and hope that someone gets into cap trouble and maybe pull even like what the Islanders did with Boychuk? I mean, to me, that's the only way that you'd possibly do something, with a big name, is if you can kind of free someone from cap purgatory. But other than that, I can't, especially looking at that quote now, I think that they know that this is more than a one-year fix.
Yeah, I would hope so, and because it's not going to be easy to get a balance of, hey, we're rebuilding, but hey, we need to give the fans something to look forward to. We need to get fans in the stands. Because for me personally, we'll go off on a side tangent here. I was a season ticket holder starting in the 2011-12 season, and we did that. But in the last 3 years, there hasn't been really much hope of anything. So, and they raised ticket prices again. So me and my dad elected not to take them. We sat up in 116. It was $22 our first year. I think they raised it before the 2013-14 season, which is fine. They raised it $1. That's fine. I mean, they're $23 to their mezzanine level. And then, they raised it $4 more, so my seats went from 23 to 27 apiece for the upcoming season, which is still, by the way, a tremendous, fantastic value deal for anyone. If you're a family or whatever, or if you're just a guy who loves the Devils blindly, whatever, it's an awesome deal. But with the way things are going and the way ticket prices are for the Devils and how easy it is to get them online or on the Facebook groups or whatever, we just elected not to. And I'm interested to see how, depending on what they do, if they don't do much, what is the fan engagement going to be like next year? Because there's only so much you can do to curate, excitement on social media with viewing parties, whatever, if the team's not very good. Because there isn't really there is a section of diehards, but there hasn't been enough time to build, an unwillingly, till our tombstone with the Devils type of passion just yet. So it's tough to excite a fan base if the team's not at least somewhat good. And I'm not sure if they can do that, if they can find a balance of that.
Why not come out and say you're rebuilding? I mean, I don't think that's such a bad thing. Obviously, you preface it by saying that you expect the team to go out and play hard every night, but I don't know, why the term rebuild is such a volatile term, because to me it means that you're doing things to ensure the future of this team. And you've seen teams who have done it. I mean, look, Tampa Bay kind of fell off, and all of a sudden, look at the young talent they have. You look at across the league that there's teams, even the Ducks, who are they were good for a while, but they get the young guys in there. Now they're a really legitimate contender with the Kings out, and we'll see what happens with that series. But even if you want to go across the river to the Rangers and the Islanders, who are winning with young talent, Islanders especially, why not say you're going to rebuild? I have no problem with that, and say that the goal is to get better. You don't have to necessarily say you're going to lose, of course, because they would never do that. But I don't have a problem with Lou coming out and say that we're going to do this, some sort of quote of we're going to build this the right way, and we realize that we need to go back and find the right guys that want to be here and bring us back to the level that we want to. I have no problem with that. To me, you don't need to sugarcoat things and say, oh, catch the great excitement of Devils hockey, when they're the 7th place team in an 8-team division. Instead kind of let fans know that, we don't think you're idiots, and you realize, the fans realize what's going on, and, we'll try to make it better.
Because they already cater to the fan. They've already made it very family friendly. They've done a good job of that already. So really, there's really not much for them to do marketing wise anyway, I don't think, because they've made it family friendly. They get the average family in, and the diehards who want to go see the team play are going to come regardless. So I think really, the only thing left to be taken care of is winning. So just stick with what you got. When the winning comes, the rest of the fans will come, and you'll have close to a full building every night. So I hope that ends up being the case. With the new talent evaluator is also comes a new coach, and Ray Shero is the guy. He appears he has full autonomy to do whatever he wants. He just has to consult with Lamoriello, but it appears Shero is going to have full power to do whatever he likes. So you can throw the names out there. We've thrown out the names in the past, like Guy Boucher, a guy who's got Montreal ties, which is something that is very much admired by Lou Lamoriello based upon coaches he's hired in the past. Could Claude Julien come back? But apparently, obviously the hot name, considering who Shero brought in a few years ago, midway through a season to win a Stanley Cup, mind you, is Dan Bylsma. And I'd have to say, I can't disagree with bringing Dan Bylsma in. We talk about the job he did with a team that had Crosby and Malkin out for a long stretch of time when he won the Jack Adams a few years ago. So he can get quality results out of a team that doesn't have superstars. So I don't really have a passionate choice, so to speak, but I would say he's right near the top of the list for me, and I think he'll get the most out of a team that doesn't have a lot of talent. He's got that good even keel attitude. He can bark it up when he needs to. He can sit back and kind of just let the players and the leadership group patrol itself when that needs to happen. But I would say he's probably my top guy, and he's probably the guy who makes the most sense given the history of the two guys.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that because there is the synergy there between Shiro and Bylsma. But a couple other names. Actually, I'll start off with this. There's two names that if you're thinking these names, just stop. One of them is Mike Babcock. I think there's probably 20-something other teams he'd go to before he came here. This is a guy that expects to win. The only reason maybe why he'd go to Buffalo is because they do have some talent, like some real top-end young talent with Evander Kane now and what's going to be Jack Eichel. I don't even think he's going to go there. And the other name is Tortorella, which I know people have have thrown that around. Come on. I mean, look, we're not going back to the Stone Age here. It's not going to happen. So, speaking in terms of people who might be available, I do think Ken Hitchcock is going to be let go in St. Louis. I just think it's a foregone conclusion. At some point,
he's been linked to the Devils before, so that's not totally out of the question.
He's good. He's good with young players. I mean, we see that he wasn't able to win with a lot of talent in the playoffs, which does kind of scare me. But he is a guy that's won before. I mean, he's won a cup, and he has been a very good nurturer of young players. And if that's the route that the Devils are going to go, to me, he's actually a logical choice if that's the case. The other name, Todd McClellan, I would stay away from him. I just don't know if he can recover from that volatile situation in San Jose. I think he needs to take a year or two and step away from the game, and maybe because you saw the dressing room fell apart on him. And sure, he was a good coach and he made some good moves and the team was competitive, but any coach that loses a locker room, that always scares me. So to me, I would say it's between Bylsma, maybe Hitchcock if he does get fired. But yeah, I think there's no doubt that Bylsma is the guy there. But you never know. How many people thought Pete DeBoer was going to be the Devils coach before he became the Devils coach?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of How
many people thought Claude Julien was going to be the guy
exactly.
Years before that? So there's always. I mean, how many people knew Lou Lamoriello was going to step down at 4:00 the other day? I mean, you never know what's going to happen. So I'm very intrigued because it is.
Yeah.
This is probably say the most. It's a very crucial moment in the franchise's history and future right now. It's a lot will ride and depend on what happens.
It's something that I actually heard the other day, which I really wonder. Someone, I forgot, I was listening to NHL radio, and someone made the point of, is this the end of the Devils being this close to the best team? Are we going to find things out now? I mean, look, the Corey Schneider trade happened and no one had any idea. The Devils have been very good. Even when Mike Camilleri was here last summer, he denied, and he just, I'm here for personal reasons, and then he signs. Are we going to see the end of that? With Lou not being the GM, is stuff going to get out there? Is this not going to be the old, tight-lipped Devils organization that we're used to? I mean, certainly it's not the end of the world if it isn't, but I really wonder if without Lou having autonomy, if it's going to be hard for them in this day and age with all the social media and such to keep the tight lips that they have.
I think he'll have even more time to focus on that now. So I think if it's possible, it's going to be even more locked down because really, what is Lou doing? If he's given all the power to Shiro, what exactly is Lou Lamoriello doing from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 p.m. every night from here, through the end of next season? I don't know what he's doing really. Do you know what he's doing besides sitting in his office stroking a pet cat? I don't know what else he's doing.
Making Mercedes-Benz commercials?
Yes. What town is the?
Caldwell.
Yeah. Caldwell's newest rising star. Without pronouncing the R's with that Massachusetts, New England accent.
Love it.
So awkward and terrible. Why would anyone want him voicing that?
Probably because he wouldn't let the players do it, honestly. I'm not even kidding. I mean,
Zach do a commercial.
He doesn't. He doesn't let. I mean, I hope that changes. That the players are going to be a little bit more accessible now, because that was one thing under Lou. You want to talk about building the team and building the fan base because of player outreach. The players are very hard to get a hold of. I mean, even sure, the coach might do a radio spot now and then, or Zajac, I remember, was on WFAN once or something like that. Maybe Zach a couple times, but why not have a Devils player do a weekly spot with, say, Joe and Evan on WFAN, just so that they're talking Devils hockey for a little bit. I think that he was very against the players kind of ever talking. If he had his way, I think the players would have their mouths sewn shut.
If he had his way, Tom Gliddy and Rich Shear wouldn't have jobs.
Yeah. That's a good point. But, yeah, I really wonder what's going to happen in terms of that.
Yeah, I don't see it changing, but I guess you never know. So let's talk about some of the player personnel on this team. They re-signed Jordan Tootoo, one-year deal, which, by the way, is just excellent. How many times have we seen the Devils in years past like away a third or fourth line players performing, or just are interested in a third or fourth line player, and they give them a 3-year deal, not even like a 2-year deal or that 1-year deal. They've given him a 3-year deal. I mean, the debacle that was the Eric Bolton, the Andrew Peters contracts, 3-year freaking deals for these guys. At least the last few years, there's been 2 years for Gianta, 2 years for Joseph. To get Tootoo to commit to just 1 year after, you could probably argue he probably could have gotten 2 years somewhere else. Now, maybe he wouldn't have gotten as high as whatever it was, the $875K, but he probably could have gotten a 2-year, $1.5 million deal somewhere else, a little bit more security. But however they pulled that off, you get a guy who played very well last season on a 1-year deal, which is nice. Again, that's not it's not anything to be too super excited about or too hyper about. But you get a guy who performed well last year. You get him back on a 1-year deal, which is very nice. Now, I'd love to see them do the same thing with Steve Bernier for sure.
Yeah, he deserves a roster spot for sure next year. I thought he actually was very good.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much talk. It was very well documented that he was so nervous about in the 2013-14 season. He didn't play very much. He was in the minors most of the season. That he was worried about screwing up and making a mistake when he was in the lineup. That this year he just kind of let it loose when he finally got called up. He just let it loose, and he turned out to be an extremely important player for the Devils. So if you get him and Gomez back on 1-year deals, I think that's about as perfect as you could do it. If you have to extend. I would say if you have to extend yourself to a 2-year deal for Gomez, I'm okay with that because he has legs, he has actual skills, puck handling, passing. I wouldn't mind doing that, but I'd prefer to keep Bernier to a 1-year deal. So I think as far as in-house Devils forwards, that's the way I would take that.
You know what? I wouldn't even mind giving him a 1-year deal that's worth probably more than he should have been given. Just to kind of have that ability to make moves next year if things present themselves. If a guy demands 2 years and you say, how about we give you the 2-year money over 1 year? They have the money. I just look at it and say that this team should be able to do as much as they can next year. Of course, right now, the only guys they have signed forward-wise for next year are Zajac at 5.75 until 2021, which is ridiculous. Mike Camilleri at 5, Chloe at 4.85, but that could be LTIR, and then Adam Henrique at 4. So
2016-17, right?
Yes, beyond next year.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I mean, that is the good thing, and that's why when you and I speak, I'm looking forward to 2 years from now when you get all the contracts off the books you can. Obviously, you're stuck with Zajac, you're stuck with Chloe, except maybe you get bailed out with him being on long-term IR. You've gotten rid of all the bad contracts possible, which is very good. And then you've got money to spend elsewhere. And then really, even on the 2016-17 team in total, you only have a few guys. You have right now, 2 seasons from now, a total of 8 guys on the roster who played significant roles last year. The 4 forwards you mentioned, Green and Severson, and the 2 goaltenders, Schneider and Kincaid. So there is a lot of room to do great things come the 2016 offseason, depending what they want to do with some of the guys they have. And I know, we'll get to Twitter questions in a little bit. You're not going to be able to trade any of these guys. You're not going to be able to trade Zubris, Rutu. Elias, you do the right thing and you just let him finish out the year because, I think he still has a tiny bit left in the tank. He still has a bit of sniper element to his game. He's not a consistent sniper anymore, obviously, but when he's in between the circles and he's got the puck and he's alone for a moment, he can still put the puck home. So I still like what he brings to the table. Obviously not for his price, but him as a player, I think he still fits well with the Devils and what they're trying to do. So you just got to ride the season out. I don't think you can't do anything with Rutu Zubris. Steven Gianta's here for another year. There's nothing you can do. Thankfully, some bad ones are already off the books. There's no more Havlat and Ryder. There's no more Bryce Salvador. So some of those things will help. So I think this is really, for me, this is all building towards 16, 17. I really wouldn't tinker with the roster too much. If they want to add one piece, there's enough for them. Right now it's about $21 million, depending if the cap rises a little bit more or moves. But as of right now, with this year's cap, if it stays right around here, it's $21 million they have to work with. They're going to have to give Larson a long-term deal. It's time to lock him up. Don't let him even think about getting to a UFA position next year. So you spend whatever $3.5-4 million on him. I'm totally fine with that for a long-term deal. That's fine. And really, I don't have anything else. You could probably tender Eric Jelena a one-year deal, and then really after that, you've probably got, and you have to get all the minors people, whatever. You probably will end up having somewhere in the low teens of cap. So if they want to make a substantial move, they certainly have the capability to do that. But would it be better off just holding on to that money? I'm not sure right now, and that's part of the intriguing process for Ray Shero to evaluate everything the Devils have, evaluate the cap situation, and what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they need to fight the pressure to bring in someone and overpay. That's the biggest thing, is that you can't be short-sighted right now, because that money that might look good to spend now, I mean, they're not going to have to deal with the cap basement. At least this year they won't have to. They're already going to be above it as long as they sign some of the guys. 2 years from now they might have to deal with that, but certainly you can spend your money anyway. So to me, it's just the matter of, as you said, just getting through this season. And I know it's tough. We've really never went through this before as Devils fans, where it's a season where there's pretty much no expectations. But when you look at it and you say that the goaltender is there and the defense certainly has the ability to improve with the young guys, you build from the net out. Look, if they can get Boucher going and draft a guy like Marner, maybe Mitch Marner, who we get into, or even some of the other guys out there, and have them in Quenneville ready to go in 2-3 years, then all of a sudden maybe it's there. But you look at even a team like Chicago that's reloaded with their offensive prospects there. Even after the big guns came up, that's what the Devils need. Is they need to start stacking the farm system. I hate to say it, but they almost kind of feel like the New York Mets did a few years ago, where they had absolutely nothing in the farm system to come up with at the moment, and you knew that they could get better. I just hope that we don't get the next year is our year kind of thing, because certainly we're in year one of this rebuild, but who knows if it's going to take a year? It might take 5.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it'll be sooner than possible. All you want to see is just some trends upward. Even this year, even if they finish with less points than last year, that's okay. Just as long as there's some signs of life from guys like John Merrill, Damon Severson, guys on the roster who are young. You'd love to see maybe Eric Jelena still has another step to take. That's really all you're looking for next year. You're not looking for results, statistical results, number results, just some eye test movements from guys who need to take another step in their game. And you mentioned John Quenneville. I mean, he looked like a disappointment early in the year playing in the Western Hockey League with the Brandon Wheat Kings, but he tore it up. I'm not sure how far they've progressed, but I constantly was reading about him pumping in assists or goals in the WHL playoffs. So that's certainly a hope. And he's just a kid. He just turned 19 about a month ago. So hopefully there is hope for John Quenneville to be something, but it'll probably be a few more years from now. When the new coach is picked, there will be a captain to be named. And really, there's only a few logical choices for this. It's either going to be Zajac, Henrique, or Green, I would think at this point. No one else really makes sense. I mean, for me personally, I would make it I'd make it Andy Green. I think he exemplifies a Devil more than anyone else. I mean, talk about a guy who undrafted free agent who totally appreciates the situation he's in, totally appreciates everything he's done. He hasn't taken anything for granted during his time as a Devil. Chips in offensively. I mean, for me, I think it would be the most sense to make it him. You don't want Travis Zajac, I mean, gosh, he's got so much pressure on him already with all the money he makes and how little he produced. Don't make him captain. Gosh, that would just be I like you said, Trey, he's a good guy. You see him waving to his wife and his kid during warmups and stuff. He's a good guy. You feel bad for him. You want him to do better. Don't put the captaincy on him. That would probably be the dumbest thing this organization could do. So hopefully it's either Henrique or Green. I mean, in all likelihood, what you'd like to have is you'd like to have Green be it, and then when he's towards the end of retirement, Henrique to take it while he's in the prime of his career, his late 20s, early 30s. I think that would be the ideal movement for the course of this personnel. But Andy Green, there's not going to be any extra pressure on him. He plays great defense. There's no number results attached to his name that says, hey, he had a good or a bad season. He just needs to play good defense, and if he chips in offensively, it's a bonus. I'd make it Andy Green. Don't put any pressure on Zajac, and we don't need I don't think it's right to make Henrique the captain. We don't need a 24, 25-year-old kid being a captain on a team that's this old.
Yeah, I mean, Henrique's a good player, but you don't make a young guy like that a captain unless he's so far and ahead of everyone else, and a lot of times that doesn't work either. To me, Andy Green is the perfect guy. I don't think there's anyone else who's even remotely close to it. Just because you look at what Andy Green did in terms of, something that goes a little bit unnoticed is how much he changed his game to best fit this team. When he came up, he was a guy who could dish the puck, and he could score a little bit. He had 37 points one year. He was a guy who had pretty good offensive upside. Maybe that we could expect him to be a 30-point guy here and there. He's played much more of a defensively sound game, knowing that he has to be the minutes eater, logging huge minutes against the top lines of other teams. And because of that, his offensive game has struggled. You never hear anything bad from him. He takes it in stride. He goes out there and plays hard every game. And you know what? I'm sure, with all the young guys out there, that making him captain and having the leader of the young D-Corps be the captain there is a good thing, because it can help the young guys look to him specifically for mentorship as they continue to grow. As far as the A's go, obviously Elias this year, and then maybe if you want to look, I don't even mind Camilleri having an A, to be honest, because I thought that he brought a lot of tenacity to the team this year and played really hard when maybe other guys weren't really giving as much effort late in the year. So I have no problem with that. But yeah, I think it's a done deal, Andy Green. If anyone else, if you want to, Jeff, you want to get back to making odds predictions here, I would say anyone else has got to be at least 100-1 odds at this point.
Yeah, go Green 3-1, Zajac 5-1, Henrique 10-1, and anyone after that is
way down. Yeah,
100-1 plus, 100 plus to 1. I can't see anyone else fitting the bill for that. So that's kind of the deal for that. Let's talk about the draft for a minute. Dave, you've got a little more. We'll talk about the draft, and then we'll get some questions, comments from Twitter. Well, the Devils are in the 6 hole, and there's no doubt they've got to take a forward. And it appears there's maybe 2 or 3 guys to choose from. And it appears like that's the name I've heard the most that you mentioned before is Mitch Marner, 5'11" guy, shifty with the puck. Really something the Devils lacked. A lot of guys who can stick handle their way through neutral zone. I mean, that's really, you could, as far as, goal scorers, obviously you need that. But as far as guys who can take the puck, rush the puck up from blue line to blue line, he's certainly a guy I think who would fit the bill. He's a center, which they lack desperately. He kind of makes the most sense of anyone out there.
Yeah, it's funny that there's almost kind of 2 tiers to this draft, not just in terms of talent, but how it's going to, or you have the Oilers, Buffalo, Arizona, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the top 4 are pretty much set. It's going to be McDavid, Eichel. Some people have it as Dylan Strome, brother of Ryan Strome, going 3, and then Noah Hannafin, the defenseman from Boston College, going 4. Those 2 are going to go 3 or 4 regardless, unless someone does trade up and do something. And because the Devils have the 6th pick, it's almost like they kind of miss out on the first pick of the rest of the draft, because where these guys are going to go in the top 4. And then after that, there's kind of 4 or 5 forwards that can maybe somehow tantalize someone there. A couple of defensemen, Devils probably aren't going to go that route. At least I hope not. So it's really interesting looking at that, because Mitch Marner, I think, is the guy that they should go with. Why? Because I think you build your team around your centers first. I mean, look, you see what a guy like Michael Ryder can do on a good team that gets him the puck, and you see what he can do on a bad team. To me, if you have centers that are playmakers, you can find goal scorers that can pump in 20 to 30 if they have any sort of talent.
Well said.
I would go center first. There's the other guy who is interesting is Lawson Krause. He's a big dude. He plays for Kingston in the OHL. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, but he's more of a powered forward. He does score, but
we don't turn into a dinosaur. The Devils do not need that.
No, to me, he has typical Devils third liner written all over it. I don't like him. The other guy is a guy by the name of Mikko Rantanen, who is a Finnish guy. He's big too. He's 6'3", 211 pounds. He's more of an explosive guy. He has good hands. He can shoot the puck a little bit. He might be the other guy who's in there. A couple other names just to throw around. Pavel Zacha, who is from Sarnia, of course, where Reid Boucher played. He's another guy. And then Matthew Barzal, who's another center. Who has some playmaking ability, but I think he's probably going to drop a little bit farther. I would think it's either going to be Marner or Rantanen for the Devils unless something else happens or they trade down or even trade up or something like that. But those would be my two. If I had my way, I'd pick Marner, but he might not be there at 6.
Yeah, let's hope the Devils you just want a guy who can contribute. I mean, if they have to take a defenseman and they're, if they take a defenseman, but then they can turn, John Merrill and Eric Jelena into a second line center who's consistent, fine. I mean, whatever you got to do, just make sure it's a guy. As long as they draft a guy that leads to an impact player, whether it's the actual player coming up and doing well, or whether it means shipping out other options at the pro level or prospects for guys. So I mean, that's really all your hope for. I mean, this would be a nice one for the Devils to get right. So let's hope that ends up being the case. All right, let's take some questions, comments from Twitter, and start off with @Schneider4Vez. He would like them to sign a veteran defenseman. Says hopefully former Devil Paul Martin to help Andy with the younglings. Well, I actually think that's kind of a nice idea. Now, for me, ultimately, that scenario would happen if a few of the guys have already been traded out. As in, I don't want Paul Martin taking away ice time from Jelena, Merrill, Severson, any of those guys. So what I would like to see, if you trade one or two of those young defensemen, then you still have, maybe 3 of them on board. Then Paul Martin would probably probably be able to help Andy in that regard. And I think that would end up being a nice move. We know the Devils, they do bring back former Devils. I know Paul Martin was a guy the Devils probably wanted to keep 5 years ago, but he got a tremendous deal from the Pittsburgh Penguins. He couldn't match. He couldn't give up 5 years, $25 million. And I can see it happening. Now, if you're going to bring him in, obviously, I'd give him a deal similar to Yager's in terms of, all right, we'll give you $1.5 million base salary, but you've got to get to 40, 50 games for us to start paying you a little bit more. We need some incentive there to have Paul Martin on this team. I would sign him maybe to a 1-year deal where he could probably maybe reach up to like $4 million, but only give him maybe $1.5 million base, something like that. And once he reaches 50-some games, then the Devils could dish out some money to him. But Dave, do you like that? I mean, I think a veteran defenseman's a good idea in general, but you might have to trade one or two of the young guys first. I don't want him potentially taking ice time away from a young kid.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think that they need a guy to replace what Bryce Salvador used to be to this team. They need a big, burly guy who can block shots, eat minutes. I don't think Paul Martin is that guy. Not to mention, the Devils know Paul Martin. So does Ray Shero. So may possibly Dan Bilesma if he is the coach. So they know the book on him, and maybe they'll decide they like him. Maybe they don't. Bilesma did pick him for the Olympic team in 2014, so you got to have the feeling that they do like him. But I would think that they want a guy more than anything that can be a third pairing guy that can just be a stay-at-home and kind of be that grinder, the guy who can just throw the body around. I don't necessarily think that they need another guy who's sort of a puck mover, maybe not a great offensive defenseman, but a guy who certainly doesn't bring the hammer like other guys can. I don't know if he'd fit necessarily.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. So I mean, we'll see if they end up adding a D. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea in general. I mean, I think what probably will end up happening is that Peter Harold will get re-signed and he'll be the 6th, 7th defenseman again. And I know how much that'll make Devils fans so very happy. A couple people mentioned the Devils should get top guy, Phil Kessel, Evgeny Malkin, Taylor Hall. Well, if you're going to get a guy, I'd go get Evgeny Malkin because I think there might be a deal in place there where Ray Shero might be able to sweet talk his way into getting Malkin, taking Malkin off their hands, maybe giving him whatever you want to call it, taking on pretty much all the money, or setting back a healthy amount of prospects their way, or trading something, maybe trading that first round pick, that 6th pick, considering the Penguins don't have a whole lot of draft picks. Maybe the Devils trade that number 6 pick for number 6 pick and something else for Malkin. I mean, I don't think that's off the table by any means, but obviously you want an offensive star, someone who's in his prime, no question about it, or someone who's about to be in his prime. I just don't see how they get someone unless you're willing to part with the defense, which you can do. I'm okay with keeping, maybe just Severson, and you ship off Merrill and Jelena and maybe a first-round pick down the road, and you get a high-caliber offensive guy. I'm not opposed to that because you need elite talent to win. You're going to need 2 or 3 guys who are capable of 25, 30 goals every year. So if it means having to give up something to get them, I'm okay with that, because no one wins without 3 25-plus goal scorers. So if you have to go get one, I'm all for unloading some of the kids and going to get them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against it. He certainly has shown that he can be an elite player at times. The injury concerns do scare me because he always seems like he's a little bit beat up. And also it's a guy who, maybe this isn't a big deal, but you have to think about it, that if you're going to be playing your divisional opponents in the first rounds, you're bringing in a guy that everyone has the book on, including the team that he was on, where you're bringing, maybe he might be used a little bit differently, but he's certainly a guy that every team in this division knows how to defend. And, if your goal is making the playoffs, you're going to play a team that's already seen him. I wouldn't be against it, but he does have a big contract. And depending upon who you're – I mean, look, I don't want to give up Severson for him. I think that'd be too much. And you know what? I'd like to see them develop some talent. But if it happened, I wouldn't be totally against it, that's for sure.
Yeah, so hopefully there's something done. I mean, I've never heard Lou Lamoriello in the middle of the season saying we need to get scorers for next year. I've never, ever heard him say that. Normally says, hey, we're sticking the course. We've got the right guys here. I've never heard him, whatever it was in January, February, saying we need to add scoring for next season. So I've never heard that. So I think there is going to be a dedication to get a scorer, but hopefully not mortgaging too much of the future, and which is hard to do. I mean, listen, if the Devils trade for a scorer, I'm willing to bet there's going to be fans who love it, and there's going to be fans who hated how much they gave. And that's, and normally that's the sign of a trade that, I think normally management is doing something right. If a lot of fans love it and a lot of fans hate it, I think they're doing something right, because you're not going to get a perfect deal. I mean, how often do you get a deal where you say, oh, everybody loves it or everybody hates it? So if you get a split opinion, you're probably doing something right, I would think, if the Devils end up going that route. Sarah East Coast said if the Devils make the playoffs next season, we should have a giant bash. I'm in. Let's put it this way. If the Devils get in next year, obviously it'll be a big party at the Rock for the first 2 games of the first 2 home games for the series. But we will promise to try and set up something with a place there for the first road game of that first round series. If they're playing, if it's game 1 or if it's game 3 on the road, we will try and set something up with a local establishment in Newark, and everybody can jump the train in, drive in, park on Broad Street for free after 6 o'clock, and we'll just have a good old fashioned time. So, Dave, you down for that? Sounds because it pretty much will be a party if they make the playoffs next season. It doesn't even matter what they do if they make the playoffs next year. It'll just be a party that they made it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen at this point, but you never know. I'd be all for that if that's the case.
Yeah, let's do that. Mr. Jared Moore, who works with one of our favorite people who we got into a tussle with on Twitter a few years ago, Adam Shine. He wants to know, is a hot dog a sandwich? It is not. And the reason it is, for me, in my world, I know there is the great sauce gravy debate on Devil's Twitter. There's always that's the case. Pork roll, Taylor ham. If this is a new thing, perhaps, no. A sandwich needs to have cheese or mayo on it. You can have both, but it's got to be one or the other. And I've never seen a hot dog with mayo, or a hot dog simply with cheese. Obviously, there's chili cheese dogs, but no one is having a hot dog with just cheese on it. So I will say no, it is not a sandwich because it does not have one or both of those elements.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with no. I mean, to me, it's not a hot dog. Is it's a confined, it's a tube steak, if you want to call it that. To me, I look at a sandwich as being some sort of meat or lots of veggies and layers to it. And sure, you could put a lot of stuff on a hot dog, but I don't know if I'd quite go there with that. To be honest, that's the most perplexed I've been today, which is interesting.
Yeah, we can figure out the Devil's cap situation, but that might be the toughest question we've had. Might be the toughest question we'll get maybe all the way up until the draft in June. So I think that'll just about do it. Dave, anything else you want to add or say?
The biggest thing is stay calm. I know this is uncharted territory for this team. We're all used to winning. We see the team across the river doing something that, hey, if you're listening to this 2 days from now, who knows? I hope they're out, but they might not be. They probably won't be.
Get them the hell out. Whatever it takes tonight, Capitals,
please.
On Wednesday, Capitals. Get it done.
Yeah, but it is tough being a Devils fan because you see all these Ranger fans who act like they've been good for decades, and the Devils have never won. And you know what? Look, let the Ranger fans have their moment because they're going to have trouble signing some of their guys in the future, and just have faith that this team will build it the right way. And you know what? If you really want to see this team make the playoffs next year, you're probably going to hurt yourself for the future. The biggest thing is let's wait a couple years and then let's have a 10-year run where all of a sudden this team is competitive again. That's all you can ask for.
Get back to the good old days. If it means suffering 2 or 3 more years to get back to the good old days, I'm in. So whatever it takes.
Oh, and re-sign Peter Harold.
Yeah, no, of course. We want that veteran defenseman to eat time away from the young kids. Get Peter back 3 years. Give him $5 million total. Done. Guy's a hero.
Yep. Peter Harold, All-Star Hockey.
For Dave Turner, I'm Jeff O'Connor. We will. We'll talk again sometime soon. I would think maybe once a head coach is named, we'll kind of. And we'll tussle with that a little bit as we get closer to the draft, we get closer to free agency, and then I know we've done a free agency show the last few years. I won't be able to do that. Dave, I don't know if you have any plan. I will be on my honeymoon. I guess I'm getting married on June 27th, so I will not be around for free agency, and I'll probably get my head smacked if I try and check free agency stuff on July 1st while we're away. So I will
please enjoy your honeymoon. Where are you going, by the way?
We're going to Bermuda.
Oh, very cool. Yes, please enjoy and don't worry about what the Devils aren't doing.
Yeah, last thing I want to do is anger myself for reading the Devils signing a third line forward to a 4-year deal and break myself on vacation. So I will avoid that. But we'll talk again probably once the team names a head coach. I would assume they're going to have one in place before the draft. It would look kind of silly if they didn't. I'd be surprised if the Devils don't have a coach really for the end of the month, I would say. So we'll see how that shakes out. So for Dave Turner, I'm Jeff O'Connor. We will talk again soon. This has been the Devils Insiders Podcast. Talk to you soon.